Hi, everyone. I'm Michelle Rusk, your host. This is the Holistic Living interview series, and today I am very excited to welcome our guest, Dr. Keesha Ewers. Am I saying that correctly? Ewers? Okay.
Yes, you are.
A little bit about Dr. Keesha. She is a board certified functional and Ayurvedic medical practitioner, as well as a doctor of sexology, family practice, advanced registered nurse practitioner, a certified psychotherapist. Am I saying this correctly? Hachumera? Hachumera?
Wachumera, yes.
Hachumera, which is a medicine woman trained in the use of plant medicine from Peru, and Reiki master and angel therapist. She is the founder of a new branch of medicine called functional sexology, and the founder and a host of the Healthy You Radio Network. She practices what she calls mystic medicine. She has been in the medical field for over 30 years, and her constant thirst for knowledge in the pursuit of finding answers to her patients' problems has taken her around the world. She is a popular speaker, and she is the #1 best-selling author of Solving the Autoimmune Puzzle, The Woman's Guide to Reclaiming Emotional Freedom and Vibrant Health. So welcome, Dr. Keesha. I'm really excited.
Oh, thank you. It's really my pleasure to be here.
Yeah. So go ahead and tell us a little bit about yourself and your journey.
Well, I often get asked how I got interested in the number of things that I do and, what led me to write Solving the Autoimmune Puzzle. And it was because of my own story. And I would say 99.9%. In fact, I haven't met anyone inside the functional medicine or integrative medicine community who doesn't have their own story. Yeah. I call it being in the matrix or outside of the matrix. And there's nothing like, getting diagnosed with a disease that has absolutely no cure to pop you out of the matrix if you're going to start looking for ways to really cure it or reverse it rather than just symptom manage it. Right. So when I was 30, I was diagnosed with rheumatoid arthritis, which is an autoimmune disease that has no cure. And when I went in, to get diagnosed, I had overnight literally gained 10 pounds and woke up with these joints that were red and inflamed and swollen. And it was as if someone had popped the battery out of the Energizer battery bunny. I used to be the Energizer bunny. And then that morning, all of a sudden, and I'm putting that in air quotes because that's how my patients describe it too, where all of a sudden they're sick. And that's actually not really accurate. It takes anywhere from 10 to 30 years to really develop any kind of chronic illness of that nature. And that's a really interesting point because we aren't trained in our culture to listen to the feedback of our bodies in a way that's collaborative. Right. We're more combative with it. If we have pain, we take an Advil or a Tylenol, and we want the pain gone. We don't really ask our bodies why the pain is there and what we can do, for it and to serve it. Right. Yeah. And so we just really kind of our brains dragging our bodies behind all the time. Yes. So when I was diagnosed, I, through my path, I was led to this word Ayurveda, which is the sister science of yoga. It's a 10,000-year-old framework of medicine that comes out of India. It's written in Sanskrit, so the terminology of it is a little alien to Americans, but one of the things that they had noted all those years ago is that we're not all the same person. Right. And for me, that was very revolutionary because up to that point, I had been strictly in Western medicine, in intensive care, kind of a high adrenaline junkie, loved that fast-paced sort of, I loved skydiving and marathon running, and I was raising 4 children. And I just really liked that kind of keeping myself challenged, pace. Well, when I learned about myself from an Ayurvedic perspective, one of the things that they say is that autoimmune disease is undigested anger. Really? Well, I was one of these, consummate people pleaser people and always taking care of everyone else, and I thought when I heard that I'm not an angry person, and I didn't realize that I had this tremendous anger inside my body that I had never really dealt with. And at the time that I learned about Ayurveda, I was also learning yoga and going through yoga teacher training, and I learned how to meditate. And one day as I was meditating, this word autoimmune kind of came across my forehead, my third eye space. And I really started looking at it, and I thought, oh my goodness, autoimmune means I'm attacking me. Whenever I'm unhappy, I'm present. Whenever I'm sick, I'm present, and auto means my immune system is actually going after me. And the way that I talk about this now is if you're at war with your own body, there's no winner. And, I got that. I got that I was really committing suicide in a societally acceptable way. Well, one of the things we know now is that 80% of all autoimmune diseases are diagnosed in women. And there are several reasons for that. And the people that are listening to the sound of our voices right now, I'm always saying you could be cooking up an autoimmune disease right now or have one and you don't know it, because it shows up as fatigue. It shows up as this unexplained puffiness. It shows up as digestive issues, skin inflammation, right? We have 145 different autoimmune diseases, and people don't really realize when they have Raynaud's, when their fingertips go cold and white, when they have eczema, when they have rosacea, that these are all autoimmune illnesses, and you are attacking you. And so that's something to really pay very close attention to and take very seriously, because once you have been diagnosed with one autoimmune disease, you have a 75% risk of getting another one for a good reason, because you're not taking care of the root problem. Right. And that ultimately is what I think, is why we keep going in the direction we're going. It's a pandemic, this autoimmune issue now. And I think about autoimmunity as the immune system like an archer with a bow and arrow. Yeah. And then there's this target tissue or target organ. And what we do in Western medicine is we just address the target. We don't actually go up to the archer and say, will you please put down your bow and arrow? We don't really talk to the archer. And, we're chasing this target around and moving it, and it doesn't make any sense. And so when you think about it in that way, then you're going to start thinking about, first of all, like I said before, we're all individuals, we're all different. And so every time we have a chronic illness, whether it's cancer or autoimmune disease or depression or obesity or anxiety, all of them are the same in the way that they're our own unique puzzles to solve. And there's not a one size fits all. So when we buy a puzzle, we look at the front of the box and we say, oh, I like that picture. I'd like to put that puzzle together. We open it up, we dump the pieces on the table. And then we all, if we know how to put puzzles together, do the same thing. We start turning them over so we can see the patterns and the colors. And then we start looking for the corner pieces. That's the first thing you go for. And then you start putting the edges together, right? Then you can fill in the middle. The way we do it with Western science is we tend to match drug to symptom, which means we're not really approaching it as a puzzle. We're not doing it methodically, in that sense. And so if you think about this as a puzzle, then there are 4 corner pieces to every chronic illness puzzle. One is going to be your digestive health, and all frameworks of medicine, including the one that we live in today here in our culture. Hippocrates said the same thing, that all wellness and disease start in the digestive tract. Chinese medicine says that, Ayurvedic medicine, all frameworks of medicine acknowledge the importance of the digestive system. So the microbiome has gotten a lot of press these days for a very good reason. We have over 100 trillion little bugs that live in our gut that are microscopic, and they make up 5 pounds of our body weight. That's a lot of critters. And they actually outnumber the rest of the cells that make up our physical composition by 10 to 1. So we're not their hosts, they're hosting us. If you think about it that way, then you start going, I remember sitting in a medical conference hearing those numbers and looking around thinking, is anyone else getting this? That we're not actually the host. That's interesting, right? It's a little mind-blowing. So then in that case, we want to really make sure, Ayurvedic medicine says that we're the microcosm of the macrocosm of the universe, meaning that I always think about this, just to blow your mind a little bit further. Well, what's the bigger organism that we're the microbiota for? Right? We're the little critters running around. And if you think about it in that way, you think, if the ecosystem we live in, and if we as people, civilizations and tribes and communities aren't getting along, then there's war. and it damages the environment when there's war. And that's exactly what happens in your gut. You wind up losing the integrity of the lining of your intestinal wall. That makes food release through the inside or to the outside of your lining of your gut, which is supposed to be impermeable. It now becomes permeable. Your immune system starts attacking the food you eat, and you become hypersensitive to what you're eating. And this is called leaky gut. So that's one of the puzzle corners. Okay. Another corner piece is going to be toxins, your exposure to toxins and your body's ability to get rid of them. We live in this ubiquitous toxic sludge these days. And one of the things that we have out there are pollutants that mimic estrogen, which is one of the reasons women get most of the autoimmune diseases, is because we have so many estrogen receptors in our bodies.
Right.
So, so that when we have all these, sorry,
that's okay.
You've got your 9-month-old. I've got 3 dogs back here. It's a circus. So you have these physical toxins out there, you know, pesticides and mercury and genetically modified organisms and the things that we talk about routinely. But then we also have toxic thoughts, toxic belief systems. So I'm always trying to get my students in my health coach certification program and my patients to understand that that's another level of toxicity that's often left behind.
So that's like,
and then
like toxic.
Pardon?
Like toxic energy. That's a real thing.
Yes, it is a real thing. Definitely. And then there's also energy, you know, the electromagnetic energy fields that we have so many EMFs these days, and we have more and more multiply chemically sensitive people out there. And, you know, they'll say, well, I'm just chemically sensitive, but actually that's not normal. So just accepting that and saying I'm a chemically sensitive person, or I'm an empath and I'm a super sensitive, sentient, sensate person, also means that you don't have good integrity to your lining. Okay. So if it's emotional sensitivity you have, then it means that you've got to have better boundaries. And if it's an immune sensitivity that you have, I always say if you have a hypervigilant mind, you have a hypervigilant body, because your immune system follows along if you feel like you're always in danger. So these hypersensitivity reactions are all going to occur together, not just physical, but also emotional and mental.
Right.
So then that third puzzle piece is going to be your genetics. And sure enough, my grandfather had rheumatoid arthritis at some point in his life. And so I'm genetically programmed to have autoimmune disease and cancer. It's in my upstream lineage. And that doesn't mean that I have to keep those things or even turn them on. We know that now with the science of epigenetics. And so the ability to down-regulate or manifest these genes in a different way is definitely within our control, you know, so to speak. And then the fourth corner piece of the puzzle is adverse childhood experiences. And I call this the missing piece of the puzzle, because most functional medicine doctors will address toxins on a physical level, your digestive system with diet and supplements, not the stress component, and your genetics if they are really well versed in that. And so the one that's not being really dealt with well, it gets lip service, is adverse childhood experiences. And the way I think about this now, there's a study that's called the ACEs study, the Adverse Childhood Experiences Study. And it's the largest study of its kind. That it was done between 1995 and 1997 by the Centers for Disease Control and Kaiser Permanente. And what they found is of the over 17,000 participants in this study, over 2/3 of them had an ACE score of at least 1, which means an adverse childhood experience of the nature they were looking at, which are the capital T traumas. That's going to be emotional, physical, sexual abuse. It's going to be divorce. It's going to be abandonment. It's going to be incarceration of a parent or watching a parent get abused, a parent leaving. So all of these are considered capital T traumas. And, you know, 2/3 of the people that were studied asking about those 10 things, saying yes, they had an ACE score of 1, got the researchers to go further and start looking at relationships between the ACE score and adult life. And what they saw is the higher your ACE score, the more likely you were to develop some kind of chronic illness that plagues our society today, like cancer or autoimmune disease or obesity, sedentary lifestyle, inability to take care of oneself, so self-neglect, addictions of all kinds, sexually transmitted illnesses, messy relationships. All of these things go up the higher your ACE score is. If you have an ACE score of 6 or more, you're more likely to live 20 years less than the average human being. So it's pretty remarkable, this correlation. And, the good news is, I write about this in Solving the Autoimmune Puzzle, and I'll never write about something or talk about something where you don't have a solution. I'm never going to say, so you're screwed, right? So when I have people take the ACE quiz, afterwards I say, okay, now here's what you do with it. Right. You can actually reverse the brain changes that happen with trauma. And there's this other component that I'm always trying to get women to understand, and that is that there's also lowercase t trauma. And that's something that Moll and a group of researchers looked at, and they were looking at PET scans of brains. And we already knew from PET scans that brain changes occur with post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD, capital T trauma. You actually get brain damage in the prefrontal cortex of your brain, which is your adult executive function, impulse control part of your brain. That shows up. But what we didn't know, and this study showed, is that if you perceive your stress as chronically overwhelming, so a perception of chronic daily stress, you get the same brain damage. Now, how many women do I get in my practice that are constantly saying they're overwhelmed, overburdened, overscheduled? I always say, and we do this to ourselves. No one is doing it to us, where we think we have to have our kids in 45 different events, or extracurricular activities, or we have to be, I say, bringing home the bacon, frying it up in a pan, and trying to look hot at the same time. We have women that are in this, arrested development archetypically of trying to look 20 when they're 55 or 60 or 70. And it's kind of ridiculous, because what we need in our society right now, and you can see this with the Me Too movement that's happening right now, is there's a call for men to step up to be wise elders of our culture, and women to step up and be wise women elders. This is such a glaring gap right now in our social structure. And to stop trying to look like you're 20 and act like you're 20, but step into your role. Right. Menopause means you pause and you take on the mantle of the wise woman elder of your society, of your community. And that's the call I'm always trying to have women heed. And men right now are being asked to step up to theirs and, and partner with women in a way that allows for younger generations to have a role model to look to. Yes. We've lost so much of our coming of age and our generational shifts, as we move into another stage of life and go into our human growth and developmental states. We need to have people that can guide us through. And when I was your age and I was raising young children, I intentionally looked for good mother role models around me. Yes. And good grandmother role models around me that I could partner with. Yes. And go to and watch. And I just think that we need to appear that way for those women that are looking for that now, reach back, and it's the red tent, right? So this is what the four corners are when you're trying to solve your own puzzle. And then the edge pieces are what I call the freedom framework. And it's really getting to that root cause of whatever is going on for you. It's looking at your lab data and the feedback responses of your body. And then it's connecting the dots between the choices you make in your lifestyle and that data that you're seeing. If you get on your scale and you look at, you're 15 pounds overweight, there's no shame in that. The scale's not sticking its tongue out at you and calling you a moron. We do that for ourselves. We put shame, we put guilt, we put emotional tie into it, instead of looking at it as just straight data. Oh, I need to do this, right? And so we do a lot of shaming and guilting and judging and blaming instead of just looking at the feedback of our lives and saying, well, this is a mess. It looks like I need to take a look at it and see if I need to make some different behavior choices so that I can get over here where I really want to be, right? If our relationships are in shambles, we need to take a look at where our responsibility lies in that. And we like to blame outside. We like to have a magic pill. Yeah. So it's really making that connection. And then that leads us to the fourth part of that last edge piece of your puzzle. And that's really creating a life that you want to live with intention. Instead of your factory default settings, I call it, the meanings and beliefs you created in childhood that are still running you, until you take a look at them and really intentionally reframe your story so you can reclaim your power.
Right.
So that's the solving any chronic illness puzzle right there.
Wow. It goes completely full circle. Like and a lot of it almost seems like a mindset. Like we have to.
It is.
Yeah, it almost sounds like we really have to do some serious self-examination.
I call it self-confrontation. So I did a study in 2013 called the HURT study. It's called the Healing Unresolved Trauma Study. And what I was seeing is all these women coming into my practice asking for hormone replacement therapy, bioidentical hormones, because I do prescribe bioidentical hormones. Mm-hmm. But they were asking for them just willy-nilly. And I always ask questions first before I prescribe them. And they would say, my daughter, my sister, my friend, you gave them these and they feel fantastic. I want some of that. And then I'd start asking questions like, so you say your libido's low. Do you even like your partner? And I would have people crying in my office all the time, or that they'd just gotten promoted in their job and it was completely stressful, or they had a special needs child, or they were caregiving an ill parent, or they'd lost their job. All of these things are libido suckers, right? Because they're taking away our energy and then they want hormones to replace it, which actually is not an accurate and appropriate way of using them. Mm-hmm. And so I went back to school because when I looked at the medical literature, there was nothing to support what I was seeing in my office. And that is that held on to emotional hurt will impact your health and your libido level. And I did this study, and sure enough, that's exactly what I found. But what emerged from that is a model that I put in my book that's called the HURT model. And if you have, and this is every single child has some experience in childhood that is hurtful, where they're rejected. And if they don't have a good attuned and grounded caregiver adult in that moment to help them navigate, and we can't be with our kids 24/7 to navigate, with them. And so every child comes out of their childhood with something like this, mm-hmm. where they've got what I call a trigger now, a button that they wear on the outside of their bodies that is associated with that feeling that they have of fear or anxiety or anger or hurt or danger. Yeah. And then the body creates what's called a muscle memory for that. And then we create a belief associated with that. And in my case, I was sexually abused when I was 10 by the vice principal in my elementary school. And my dad was out to sea, and I tried to tell my mom about it and the teachers around me, but I didn't have the right words. And I kind of thought it was my fault because he said it was. He said I was a bad kid. So I didn't know the word sex. I didn't know the word, abuse. I didn't know the word molest. I couldn't just come right out and say, this is what's going on. I kind of danced around it. And so my mom didn't understand what I was trying to say. I would just cry and have headaches before school and say, I don't want to go back and I don't feel safe. But I didn't really tell her because I just felt ashamed, And that's the way kids are. They're going to make stuff up about them. It's going to be self-centered because we're little humans trying to figure out how to be human on planet Earth with the other humans. And our adult brains are not developed yet. So we create these meanings. And for me, my belief that I emerged from fourth grade with was I have to be perfect to even survive, which is an impossible task. And every kid creates an impossible task for themselves of some nature. Mm-hmm. And, you could think of it on a scale of 0 to 10, where 10 is really like really tied into that meaning, and it's just stuck. And then there's going to be a gradient. So capital T trauma will create that big, huge flare, right? And so I came out of childhood very driven, very perfectionist oriented. The valedictorian of my high school, had to get straight A's, and would just completely crumble if I got a B when I was in college. I would start crying, I remember crying when I got my first cavity in my 20s because it meant I was flawed. It was just this ridiculous attachment to being perfect that I had. And so when I got my rheumatoid arthritis diagnosis, I was forced to have to examine all of this stuff and do some really heavy lifting therapy for that, some trauma release therapy. So I always say that first, sexual abuse is one of the best things that ever happened to me. And rheumatoid arthritis was one of the best things that ever happened to me. Because that self-confrontation that you were just alluding to, that willingness to go in and really do self-examination, is what allows us to evolve. It's what allows the expansion of consciousness to happen. You can't have that same expansion if you don't have some kind of resistance training. I call it the spiritual gymnasium. So if you go into your gym and you just go like this to get your bicep muscle strong, and you don't have a weight in your hand, you're not going to get very far, right? So if you put a weight there, you're going to get a muscle that's going to be defined. I think about this the same way in life now, that these challenges that we have, these big, heavy things that we really always want to avoid at all costs, are the resistance training for our character, that it's a spiritual gymnasium. So instead of running away from that, trying to avoid it at all costs, really embracing that and saying, all right, let's do this. I want to get to my next level of development, which would make you excited about the aging process.
Yeah.
Instead of trying to run back to being 20,
Yeah. My gosh. So just curious, because it's really neat to just think about all of that and how it's really all interconnected. What do you think for you, and as you've seen with your patients, what do you think is the most important step? Would you say that they were all equal, or do you say that there is one? Is it our self-confrontation, or is it changing the way that we eat, or
they're all very important, and everyone's so different, and that's why I say there's no one size fits all. But what I would recommend is start with reading Solving the Autoimmune Puzzle. There are worksheets in it. And you can, one of the things when I'm interviewed on podcasts or television shows or summits, they'll often say, so what is it that you want to leave us with? Yeah. I always say the same thing. And that is really start with watching your language. And I don't really care about shit, damn, and hell. What I'm talking about is, how you're speaking to yourself. Really looking at how many can'ts come up, how many shouldn'ts, how many times are you comparing yourself to another person? How often are you judging other people? How often are you judging yourself? We have a very limited time on this planet. And if you spend it worrying about other people, what they think of you, and judging them for judging you, right? You're wasting a whole lot of time. To me, it's the same as sitting there drinking beer and eating Doritos for your dinner, or spending all your time in front of a television. It's just a waste of time, right? Perfect. And so so it's all very important, but I would start with that internal just observation, developing what Eastern philosophy calls your observer's mind, and observing how you speak and what comes out of your mouth and how you speak to yourself internally. Are you as kind to yourself as you are to somebody that you would meet on the street who asks you for help? And if you're not, then start changing that. And you can. That's the good news. Every single thing I've talked about so far, you can change. It's under your control. And control is one of the biggest addictions humans have. We always want to control everything around us. We want to control people. We want to control our job. We want to control everything, our children. instead of controlling our own thought processes, which is really the only thing you can control. So it's shifting that to that willingness to look within, controlling that.
Yeah. My gosh. Yeah. You've left me with a lot of thoughts just for my own personal, growth and development. I think even as a mom, because I totally relate when you say, I have 4 kids too, and mine are little. They range from 12 to 9 months. So it's constant, it's constant.
Yeah.
It's busy. And right now, no, I'm not sleeping very well. I think it definitely, I think this is great. I mean, I have a lot of things to think about, and to definitely, I'm sure the viewers are learning a whole lot from you, Dr. Keesha. This is just amazing. So,
well, one of the kinds of people I love talking to is moms, and mommies, especially because they're so passionate about raising children that are healthy and have the tools, right? And yet they can be very judgmental of themselves when they fail. And so I have this health coach certification program. It's called the Academy for Integrative Medicine, Integrative Medicine Health Coach Certification Program. And I built it for people who were raising children and were finding that their kids were having trouble with maybe ADD because of all the red food coloring and whatever it is, gut issues. And the moms get very passionate because they're advocates for their children. They get on the internet. I call them summit junkies. They start getting into summits. They start learning all of this and moving outside the matrix, and oftentimes become smarter than most doctors, because there's a lot of information out there. And I have moms that will come in with binders that are tabbed and highlighted for each of their children. And they have article after article and blog posts that they have printed out that they want to ask me about. And I thought, gosh, where do these people fit in? They can make a career out of this without having to go back to school. And so I created this health coach certification program because I think of health coaches now as the answer to the medical problems that we have in our medical model. Because A, health coaches can't take insurance. And so B, then clients are willing to pay out of pocket because it's just assumed that you're paying out of pocket. And coaches get to spend an hour, 90 minutes with their client, really teaching them. In an insurance-based model, people like me are expected to spend anywhere from 6 minutes to 15 minutes at the most with their patients. And you cannot delve into any level of what I have just spent the last few minutes talking about. And so I teach my coaches how to master what I just talked about. The freedom framework, the 4 corners of the puzzle, emotional healing, healing trauma, all of these things. And so if anyone that's listening wants to make a career of that and heal their own self and become the best mom they can be, then it's a great way of figuring out the framework for that.
And I was actually reading about that earlier before I got on with you, and I saw that you do offer that, and I was like, oh my goodness, I might consider.
I have a lot of people that have interviewed me on summits that are in my program. They're health coaches that wanted to learn how to do the lab testing, that want to learn how to do the emotional healing component, want to learn about Ayurveda, want to learn the mental piece of it instead of just the nutrition. And nutrition is so important. I mean, food is medicine, but then learning that there's also emotional food and mental food and spiritual food, and how we metabolize and transform that into our bodies that's a place where a lot of people don't teach that.
Yeah. So. And I think that's right on, because I think that is whole wellness. Like that is our whole being, and that's whole wellness. So I think that's amazing. Well, I really want to thank you for coming on today, and I'm just so happy that you shared all of this fantastic information, and I learned so much. I'm sure that many of the viewers that are going to be listening to this are learning as well. So again, thank you, Dr. Keesha. It has been
a pleasure.
And if if you want to leave the viewers with any last words, go for it.
Just watch your language. And you can find more about all of these things. I have an online emotional trauma release program that you can do from the comfort of your own home on your own computer. It's called You Unbroken. And you can find all of this at drkeesha.com, drkeesha.com. And my mission is just to help people become the best version of themselves so that they can move into this world with lighting up to their full potential.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Keesha, again.
Thank you.